Welcome to our deep dive into some critical legal concepts that shape our society. These aren't exactly light topics for your average Tuesday night, but they're important. And honestly, when have we ever been afraid of making things a little bit more complicated than they need to be? Today, we'll explore distortion laws, obstruction of justice, and some key federal laws. We'll unpack the complexities, dissect the nuances, and hopefully, emerge with a better understanding of how these legal frameworks impact our lives. Buckle up, folks, it's going to be a wild ride. Now, when you hear distortion, you might think of those funhouse mirrors at the carnival, the ones that make you look like a long, stretched-out nightmare version of yourself. And while legal distortion might not be quite as visually disturbing, it can be just as disorienting. We're talking about situations where legal principles are twisted, manipulated, or just plain ignored. Think of it like this. You agree to buy a car for a certain price, shake hands, sign a contract, all very straightforward, right? But then the seller tacks on hidden fees, changes the financing terms last minute, and suddenly you're trapped in a legal maze that feels a lot like that funhouse mirror experience. That's the danger of legal distortion. It creates confusion, undermines fairness, and can seriously disadvantage those who aren't in on the game. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, isn't that what lawyers are for? To navigate these murky legal waters? And yes, you're not wrong. But the problem is, not everyone has access to expensive legal representation. This is where the concept of disparate impact comes in, particularly in areas like employment and housing. The idea is that even if a law or policy doesn't explicitly intend to discriminate, if it disproportionately harms certain groups, it's still a problem. Take, for instance, a company that only hires people who are 6 feet tall. On the surface, it might seem like a neutral requirement, but in reality it would disproportionately exclude women and certain ethnic groups, creating a system that's inherently unfair. Let's move on to another legal landmine: obstruction of justice. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's about interfering with the legal process. Now you might think, well, I'm not about to tamper with any juries or shred any crucial evidence, and that's great. We're glad to hear it. But obstruction of justice can be a lot more subtle than that. Ever heard the phrase, throwing a wrench in the works? That's essentially what we're talking about here. Any action, big or small, that hinders an investigation, influences a witness, or undermines a court proceeding. Think of it like a giant game of Jenga, with the legal system precariously balanced on a tower of blocks. Obstruction of justice is like yanking out a block from the bottom. It might seem small, but it can have catastrophic consequences for the entire structure. Now, you might be wondering what kind of wrench throwing we're talking about here. Well, it can take many forms: threatening a witness, destroying documents, even lying to investigators. All of these can qualify as obstruction of justice. And the consequences? Let's just say they can be a lot more serious than a stern talking to from a judge. Chapter 3. Federal Laws, a crash course in your rights. Alright, let's take a bit of a detour from the heavy stuff and talk about federal laws. You know, those all-important rules that govern our lives as Americans. Now, we could spend hours, days, maybe even weeks dissecting the intricacies of federal law, but for the sake of your sanity and our rapidly dwindling production budget, we'll stick to the highlights. Think of it as a crash course in your rights, a sort of federal laws for dummies, except, hopefully, a bit more entertaining. So what are we talking about here? Well, there's the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, or ADEA for short, which, as you might have guessed, protects those of us who are a little longer in the tooth from being discriminated against in the workplace. Then there's the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, a landmark piece of legislation that ensures equal opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And let's not forget about the Equal Pay Act, because, you know, equal pay for equal work, it's not just a catchy slogan, it's the law. Thanks for joining us on this journey through some of the most important legal concepts affecting our lives. We know it's not always the most glamorous subject matter, but understanding your rights and the potential pitfalls of the legal system is crucial for navigating the complexities of modern life. Stay informed and stay empowered. See you next time.